And under stormy skies and the echoes of air raid sirens, Ukraine once again faces Russia's most intense aerial assault since the war began. Hundreds of drones and missiles launched in a single night, shattering fragile hopes for peace. Kiev's resilience is tested anew as civilian casualties mount. Critical infrastructure burns amid escalating strikes deep behind front lines, and questions swirl. Is Moscow shifting strategy? Can Western aid and Ukrainian resilience hold the line? And as Putin hints at talks and Zelensky pivots towards survival, the world watches, caught between diplomacy and devastation. And I'm Salma Al-Fi'i, and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The Kiev Independent has reported that Russia has reignited accusations against Ukraine and the United States, blaming them for the collapse of recent peace talks in Istanbul after months of stagnation. Moscow claims Kiev's refusal to no sign of resolution as both sides dig in. Amid stalled negotiations, Russia intensifies military pressure with record aerial assaults targeting cities far from the front lines. Ukraine, bolstered by Western support, continues to resist while withdrawing from international treaties to match wartime realities. The humanitarian toll mounts, with civilians bearing the brunt of relentless strikes. And according to the Washington Post, Russia intensifies its summer offensive, launching the war's largest aerial assault with hundreds of drones and missiles targeting Ukrainian cities far from the front lines. Despite Ukraine's downing of nearly half, destruction and casualties mount, and including a fallen F-16 pilot, underscoring Moscow's relentless tactics. Amid escalating strikes, Russian forces press forward, seizing new territories at heavy cost. Ukraine retaliates by withdrawing from anti-mine conventions, accusing Russia of widespread civilian harm, while the West allies reaffirm military and humanitarian support. As peace talks stall and Putin claims openness to diplomacy, the conflict sinks deeper into attrition. With no end in sight, civilians endure relentless bombardment, and global alliances face mounting pressure, shaping a grim new phase in Europe's longest war. Russia's largest aerial attack yet rains destruction across Ukraine as the war intensifies. With cities ablaze, resources drained, and global tensions rising, Kiev stands hesitated and caught between exhaustion and endurance in a battle with no end in sight.
This was the night the skies over Ukraine turned into a battlefield. Russia launched its largest aerial assault since the war began. 477 drones and 60 missiles targeting cities far from the front lines, including Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, and Kiev. Despite advanced Western air defenses, the scale of the attack overwhelmed systems. Analysts warn this is not just escalation, it's exhaustion warfare. Russia aims to drain Ukraine's resources, morale, and international support. In eastern Ukraine, Russia seized another strategic prize, a high-grade lithium deposit near Tivchenko village. This mineral, vital for electric batteries and tech, was once seen as a cornerstone of a future US-Ukraine economic alliance. As pressure mounts, Washington debates new tool. Senator Graham says President Trump has signaled openness to a bipartisan sanctions bill targeting Moscow's trade partners, but progress remains fragile. Meanwhile, Ukraine withdraws from the Ottawa Mine Ban Treaty. The move comes after Russia's widespread use of anti-personnel mines, weapons that continue to haunt civilians long after the fighting ends. The war has become a technological arms race. Russia produces nearly 200 Iranian-designed Shaheds daily. Ukraine counters with tens of thousands of homemade drones, striking deep into occupied Crimea and beyond. Yet even Moscow feels the strain. Defense spending consumes 40% of public expenditure. Inflation rises and reserves shrink. But Putin insists, where the foot of a Russian soldier steps, that is ours. For Ukrainians, survival means resilience. Children grow up under sirens. Families live between fear and hope. The psychological toll is immense. Yes, so is their resolve. So, where does this war go next? Toward peace, escalation, or deeper attrition? One thing remains certain. Under fire, indoors.
And providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the Russia-Ukraine war, joining us from Moscow is Mr. Sergei Markov, the former advisor to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And from Athens, Mr. Meher Nicholas Fertzli, the director of the EU Asian Center. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining me today at Think Tank. Let me start with Mr. Markov. Sir, Russia has just launched its largest aerial attack since the invasion began, and over 537 drones and missiles hitting cities far from the front lines. Does this mark a strategic shift, or is it just part of an exhaustion campaign aimed at draining the Ukrainian morale and the Western support?
This is not shifting to the new level of conflicts. It's continuation of same level. It just means that now it's a new kind of war with more drones, and the Russian economy producing more and more drones. That's why Russian drone attacks on the territories and military object which is far from the front line is becoming intensive and bigger and bigger. It will be continued. Same, by the way, from Ukrainian side. Ukrainian economy with coordination with economy of the European countries also produced more drones and more rocket missiles, and they attacked against Russian territories far from the front line, also becoming more intensive and more far from the front line. So it just continuation and step-by-step development on the same level of the conflict.
Okay, Mr. Fertzli, we have an F-16 pilot that was killed during this massive attack, which makes me so ask you, why is there special focus particularly on that F-16 pilot in the media? And how do you actually reassess the effectiveness of NATO's military aid in countering intensifying air campaign?
I'm delighted to join you today from Athens. I think the media focus on the F-16 is justified because in war, symbols and psychology are very important. It's an emblematic airplane, and I guess it was an F-16 Falcon V-72. So what does it mean, F-16 Falcon V-72? It's the latest model, and it costs $80 million a piece. And to train a high-level Ukrainian colonel from the Ukrainian Air Force, and there aren't many of these, to train him in Paris or London or Berlin takes more than a year.
Okay.
And so what the value of the destruction of one single F-16 72V with the pilot is the equivalent of $100 million. And the Russians obliterated that in a few seconds yesterday. What I'm coming at is Ukraine is bleeding, and this war is not sustainable. But it's more than hardware. So it's more than, symbols and the cost of an airplane. It goes deeper than that. The world changed dramatically 5 months ago. 5 months ago was when President Trump entered the White House for the second time. Why did it change dramatically? Because the second Trump presidency is very different from the first one, because in his first presidency, Trump's were clipped. He did not have control of the Republican Party. His own party was to a large extent hostile to him. Why? Because his own party was controlled by an ideological political group called neocons, neoconservatives. But what Trump did, he completely destroyed the neocons within his own party, which are now reduced to a tiny faction. And you mentioned Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham,
Yes.
the only, pro-Ukrainians are left. He's a leftover. He's a leftover from the neocon era. He's a dinosaur, and they are a dying breed. So it's a big change which happened in the past 5 months, and the Ukrainians and the Europeans refuse to understand that the world has changed dramatically. So in the past 33 years, including the first Trump presidency, when Trump's leeway was very limited, the world was based on something called, the neoconservative, neoliberal agenda. That agenda has collapsed. And to make a long story short, we have entered a new era where there are only two superpowers, China and America. And what we're witnessing now is really an acceleration of the techno-industrial military Cold War II, pitting China against America, and Europe is increasingly irrelevant. Russia is no longer a superpower. However, in the eyes of Washington and Beijing, Russia is very important because it's a pivot nation. It's a very important nation to have on your side.
Let me go back to Mr. Markov. Sir, Putin recently hinted at peace talks in Istanbul, yet his forces continue relentless bombardment, and so there's otherwise different action, kind of. Is diplomacy, do you think, still viable? Or is Moscow using negotiations just as a smoke screen to consolidate territorial gains, do you think?
Well, you accuse only Moscow. You should accuse both sides, Moscow and Kiev.
Okay.
From my point of view, these peace talks now have no any perspective, except one, humanitarian. You may know that Russia is giving back to the Ukrainian side more than 6,000 killed Ukrainian soldiers. And Ukraine give back to Russia 78 Russian soldiers. By the way, it's also show very well disproportion of the losing. In fact, last exchanges usually something 1 to 40, means 1 kill Russian soldiers to the 40 kill Ukrainian soldiers. Of course, practical proportion will be a little bit bigger, but nevertheless, it looks like that Ukrainian side is losing something about 3, 4, and 5 probably more soldiers than Russian side. It's because many practical reasons. And now this peace negotiation only show for the Donald Trump, because both sides interesting Donald Trump to make a decision in their favor. Russia want Donald Trump just to stop any giving weaponry to Ukrainian army, and Ukrainian side, Vladimir Zelensky want Donald Trump again to give more weaponry to Ukrainian army and to impose more tough sanctions against Russia. And possibly, most important, Zelensky wants the United States to give a rocket missile system which can be protect not Ukrainian army, but European troops which Zelensky want that Great Britain and France should send the occupation troops on the Ukrainian territory. So it's the main ideas of the peace negotiation from the both sides. But the position now extremely far from each other, and there are no chance to reach some peace compromise.
Mr. Fertzley, Ukraine's withdrawal from several conventions, and now at the moment the Ottawa Mine Convention, signals a dramatic policy shift. And what message do you think is this sending to the European allies, and how will it impact Kiev's legal and moral standing internationally, do you think?
Once again, I am a neo-realist, so I try to look at things in a very cold, dark manner, quote unquote. And so I think it's signaling from the part, that latest move, from the Kiev government is signaling desperation. Why is it signaling desperation? Because for the first, 3.5 years of the war, the big neoconservative propaganda machine in Washington, D.C., London, Paris, Berlin, was working full steam supporting the Ukrainians against the Russians, right? So there was a lot of propaganda manufactured and engineered by the Biden White House, Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, portraying, like a painting, portraying the Ukrainians in a very positive light, and the flip side of the coin, portraying, the Russians in a very dark, evil light. And all that is collapsing now. The idea that, Zelensky is a liberal Democrat in the mold of President Jefferson. Of course he's not. So basically, I don't want to sound cynical, but Russia and Ukraine are very similar. And neither one is truly a democracy, to be honest with you. So the claim that, Kiev is a liberal democracy versus Russia, which is supposed to be a medieval, dark dictatorship, is not true. Neither one is a democracy, and it doesn't matter, really. But by backing away from the Ottawa Convention, by backing away possibly from the Geneva Convention, the mask, the Ukrainian mask is falling. And underneath the mask, what we see is the face of a dictator, a warmongering dictator, not a freedom fighter. So what I'm coming at is President Trump is right. That war has to stop. That war doesn't serve the interest of Ukrainian people. It only serves the interest of the neocon weapons manufacturers who have been bleeding Ukraine and Russia for the past 3 years. And I think Trump is right. The world.
Let me go back to Mr. Markov. Do you agree with Mr. Fertzley's opinion that it's just the war is simply not useful or doing anything for both countries, and it's just for the sake of weapons and something just economic or just financial? Do you think? Do you agree with that point of view?
Yeah, I agree with our colleague. I think he is right when he calls it neocons is principle. First of all, through United States Intelligence Service and British Intelligence Service. And from our point of view, it's war. It's not just a bad war between Russia and Ukraine. For us, it's civil war, because Ukraine was part of the Russia during 1,000 years, and Kiev been Russian capital during 3 centuries.
But sir, it's been going on for 4 years. Why isn't it stopping then in that case?
From our point of view, this war cannot be stopped because these neocons continue to control the situation. Donald Trump still not able to become real president. And British Intelligence Service and United States Intelligence Service and also leaders of Europe, they are under the control of neocons and so-called liberal globalists. And they hate Russia because they want to suppress all sovereign country, and Russia for them a very big problem, because Russia is for clear sovereign country. And also this global want to oppose as domination of so-called LGBT values, and Russian population and Vladimir Putin very well known as those who support traditional values, religious. And even talking about the values, Donald Trump very close to Vladimir Putin. But the problem is that Donald Trump still not real president of the United States.
Mr. Markov, let me just quickly, because I need to go back to Mr. Fertzley. Do you just summarize for me quickly, because the point Mr. Fertzley was talking about with Ukraine withdrawing from the Ottawa Mine Convention and actually accusing Russia of widespread harm. How does Moscow respond to that accusation? If you can just summarize to me quickly before I go back to Mr. Fertzley.
Just Moscow will give the fact. The normal strategy of the Ukrainian regime is to make crime, immediately blame Russia for such kind of crime. And it's fully supported by globalist media and in Great Britain, United States and European Union countries. All these globalist media support this Ukrainian fully falsified propaganda.
Okay, Mr. Fertzley, Slovakia's foreign minister recently suggested forgiving Russia's actions to restart diplomacy. Do such calls, do you think, reflect growing fatigue within Europe, or are they just isolated voices in an otherwise unified bloc, do you think?
I think the European and UK bloc is starting to crack. And here I would disagree respectfully with Mr. Markov in Moscow, because I think Mr. Markov overestimates the lingering neoconservative influence in Washington. In Washington, they are a spent force. Trump completely obliterated them. And so the neocons inside the Republican Party and their Democrat center-left equivalent, which is called liberal hoax, they are both very diminished. The only part of the world where the neocons are still strong is Western Europe. So clearly, Germany, the European Union, France, and to a lesser extent, the United Kingdom are still dominated. You know, the military-industrial complex, foreign policy complex is still dominated by them. However, things are cracking, and we are seeing in Italy and Britain and the UK cracks starting to appear because the Italian and the British are smart and they see that the wind is shifting in Washington. And you can see it in the behavior of Mark Rutte. You know, Mark Rutte, who was for many years the Dutch prime minister, and he's now the new Secretary General of NATO. Mark Rutte was a hardcore, overzealous European neocon. And suddenly, 5 months ago, he completely flipped. And now, now Mark Rutte is clapping and saying, great, Trump is a genius. And himself, most of his life, he was a neocon. And now he's saying that the neocons are idiots. So we're seeing many people at high level in London, Rome, flipping, which means that Germany, Poland, and France, these three countries, France, Germany, Poland, and the European Commission, led by Ursula von der Leyen, they are still dominated by the neocon, anti-Russian, pro-war thinking. But even them, even the French, the Germans, and the EU Commission are under heavy pressure. And I think now, with the emergence of a new world dominated by America and China, these guys, the European...
Okay, Mr. Fertzley, because I'm running out of time, let me go back to Mr. Markov. Mr. Markov, so how do you think Russia assesses the growing cooperation with North Korea and Iran, especially in supplying advanced drone components? And does this alliance structure offer strategic depth or deepen isolation, do you think?
First of all, I want to say compliments to our discussants. He's brilliant. It's interesting very to talk to him. And first, secondly, about North Korea and Iran. You should understand, it's Russia, North Korea sent part of their troops to Russia, but Russia didn't ask North Korea to do it. What Russia was interested in to have something more than 1 million shells, because this war to be very intensive from point of view of artillery and so on. And Russia had deficit or had shortage of such kind of shells. But to send North Korean troops, it was not of Russia, but of North Korea, because North Korean government and army want to have experience in the ultra-modern war, which happening now on this Ukrainian front. It's first. About Iran. Russia doesn't need any help and support from Iran right now. Russia needed help from Iran 3 years ago, when situation appeared to be that Russian drones was very good but very expensive. But because of sanctions, drones and rocket missiles which have been produced by Iran was very cheap. And because this war needed a lot of drones and rocket missiles and shells, Russia was very interesting to take this. And Russia took not so many drones, but first of all, factories for producing of drones from Iran. This had been done already 3 years ago. And now all these drones which used by Russia, they produce entirely on the Russian territory, and the models already much more developed.
Okay,
So,
that was Mr. Sergei Markov, the former advisor to the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Mr. Meher Nicholas Fertzley, the director of the EU Asian Center. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me here today and for your special insights and in this valuable discussion. The world watches a war of attrition intensifying, diplomacy fading, and destruction deepening, and resilience is tested. From Kiev to Moscow to global capitals, the struggle for peace grows more complex by the day. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of your changing world. And thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.